Yes.
Would you be kind enough to start us with a prayer, please?
Sure. Well, Heavenly King, that comfort the spirit of truth, you who are present everywhere and filled all things, the treasure of blessings and the giver of life, come and abide in us, cleanse us from every stain, save our souls, and bless our time together this hour, O Lord. Give us the wisdom, the guidance, that we may better understand to serve your holy people during this season of stewardship. May we continue to give of our love as you have given it to us, to others. Bless us all, bless our presenters, for you are holy unto the ages of ages.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Amen.
All right. So briefly, in case you're wondering, we've invited everybody who was at the Clergy Lady to participate in today's call. And we're, again, blessed to have Joe Kormos presenting for us today, some different material than what he presented at Clergy Lady. And Joe, not that you need the ego stroke, but I will tell you, in post Clergy Lady surveys, your presentation was well received and well thought of by all non-hierarchical personnel. And for those of you who were not there, we were fortunate to have Archbishop Demetrius with us, and he had an academic view of Joe's presentation in Camp Hill that was uniquely his own. So that's enough about that. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Joe and let him speak, and feel free to chat, send me questions via chat, or I can call on you when he's done. Joe, thank you for being with us.
Okay, thanks, Stacy. I gather then that most of you were there in Camp Hill when I spoke before, but for those who weren't, and maybe this has been passed on via email. I do a fair amount of work in consulting with parishes within the Orthodox Church in America. And one of the areas I probably have been called upon to talk about quite a bit is stewardship. I don't know that I'm an expert, but I have amassed a certain amount of ideas and thoughts as to what works and what doesn't. Probably any time I've ever talked about stewardship, I started out with the point that stewardship is certainly about more than money, and it's about understanding all the gifts that we're given by God, and to learn how to put those to good use. In some regards, maybe the better word would be discipleship. But also, almost every time I've been asked to talk about stewardship, the focus has tended to quickly go to the, when we consider time, talent, and treasure, to the treasure or financial side of stewardship. And that's fine. And I probably am guilty of focusing not as broadly as I should sometimes. So at any rate, those of you who are able to look in with your screen see a list of things that I'm going to try to cover. And really, I consider this to be sort of conversational. If you have questions, it doesn't bother me if we interrupt with questions. I'm not completely sure how we system. I guess I guess your microphones are open. I don't have to get done with all of this stuff on this page, so it isn't like, you know, if you interrupt me, I won't get to the key punchline. So at any rate, let me just start down this list. And in some ways, I will also refer to the document that some of this is from that, and it's just a way of culling some of the key points. And some of these points on here were not in that document. So let me first of all say that particularly when we talk about stewardship and people involved within a parish in stewardship, and I would say this goes certainly for priests and for laypersons as well. We've probably heard it said in many other areas that I've heard it said that getting old is not for sissies. Well, I'll say that stewardship is not for sissies. Anybody who works in a parish and has to deal with uncovering pockets of generosity within the parish has the potential of being not always received as well as they should. My experience is that most of the time that you receive very well. I've had a few instances, even with the stewardship ministry in our parish, where a couple people reacted poorly. So that's point number one. If you, and I'm assuming that many of you are not new to this area, so that you probably know some of this already. Okay, point one, stewardship is not for sissies. Point number two, I think, is that there's always a tendency, there are sort of two ways to look at stewardship. First of all, as a set of good practices, as a process, as a set of procedures, how we go about doing things. And that's good, and I'll talk probably mostly about that today. But what I've always found is that if, in fact, you're standing up in front of some people or creating stewardship, yes, there's some background noise. I don't know
Hey,
where it's
Joe,
coming.
hold on a second. Could everybody mute themselves, please, during the call, just so we don't have that? Even keyboard noise seems to be much more audible.
The speaker isn't good enough to keep everybody's undivided attention, and so we're answering emails. I'll try to do my part here.
That already sounds better. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, okay, yeah. By the way, we are recording this, Stacy, is that true?
We are indeed.
I'll then limit the level of my candor. Point I was getting to was that the stewardship, of course, is a spiritual concept, is a spiritual idea. There are practices and good methods that you can use. But the first thing I'll say then is that the people involved in stewardship should, I always suggest that you don't call yourself a stewardship team or the stewardship person or the stewardship committee. It's a ministry. It's an important ministry that fits into the fabric of the parish. And item 2B here, for those of you who are able to follow along with my outline, says here that the purpose of a good stewardship ministry is primarily to help parishioners to increase the level of meaning of Christ and his church in their lives. We tend to think as the people who are assigned to get enough money to cover the budget. And if you think about it that way, you're probably not going to be as successful as you could and should be. And that particular set of words there came from a book that I'll show you at the end, a couple of books that I've read that I thought were good. But this particular author wrote that, increase the level of meaning of Christ and his church in their lives. Part of the way to do that is to help them to see and understand generosity with the things they've been given. In the blue box right next to that, there's another quote that came from the same book, and it's a little different way of looking at this. And this is a quote that author heard from someone who had worked on a stewardship group, and they were kind of proud of what they accomplished, and he or she said a great deal of what we accomplished was to define what the church stood for and what we were committed to. We created high standards in this parish. And quite frankly, I think every ministry in a parish needs to contribute in that way, in creating high standards and understanding what we're doing. Now, in the thing that was sent, the document that was sent out by Stacy either earlier today or a couple weeks ago, I'm not clear, and it was labeled Good Orthodox Christian Stewardship Practices. It had 2 pages. On the back page, there was a box, and I find, and the labels on the box are as shown on my outline here: identity, trust, gratitude, love. I found that online. It was a series of sermons, and I'll be honest with you, it was from a Roman Catholic priest. They were excellent, and he had them recorded, and they were he got that formula from a conversation he had with a Roman Catholic monastic. And if you read those words there in the box that were sent out, I think it's really, it's my go-to approach for describing the spiritual aspect of stewardship. And then, you know, we have an identity in Christ as Christians. Everybody, we all understand that we're made by God, but it's more important, or it's particularly in this context, important to understand that we're made for God, to do his work, and that all the properties that we have are for him. And if we're doing work for him, then we need to realize that we have to trust God. As people, you know, created for God, we have to remember that he will do good for us. And in order to trust him, we have to be trustworthy. All of that enlivens a spirit of gratitude. It says here, gratitude is born from trust and being trustworthy. It helps us appreciate what we do have and to stop seeking what we don't need. And that, I think, reminds us that all of those things that are built from our identity, teaching us to trust God, enlivening a spirit of gratitude, reminds us it's important to get back to his church in love. And just as we would love our spouse or others in our family, we would want them to be well cared for. We want our church and our parish to be well cared for equally. Now, there are many clergy in the audience, and you may have equal or better depictions of the spiritual aspect of stewardship, but that's one that I've been able to keep in my head, and identity, trust, gratitude, love. So I would suggest that you kind of emblazon that in your mind and remember that, and remember one or two sentences you can say about what that means, and it builds up to the nice conclusion that if you love God and you trust God, you want his house and the house of God to be well cared for, his parish. And just as we love other things and we care for those other things, we do that for the church. Okay. The other semi-spiritual aspect of all this, and I'll again point to the thing that you received in the email. It says here on my sheet, prerequisites, see handout. You cannot undertake a stewardship ministry in a vacuum. It's dependent on so many other parts of the parish. And in the thing that was sent out by Stacy in the upper right-hand corner, there's a box that says prerequisites. And I think those are all important. Number 5 is your pledge effort or your stewardship effort. And we'll talk a little bit about that as long as I don't get too long-winded here. But prior to that, as prerequisites, there needs to be a sense of membership and commitment. Most Orthodox parishes do not do a good job, in my opinion, of describing what it means to be a member. What are the responsibilities and what are the expectations? We don't do a good job of communicating that to new members, much less old members, and we don't do a good job of assimilating. Likewise, you have to have crystal clear, transparent, well done financial practices. That's obvious. A sense of vision, a sense that the parish is going somewhere. Because without that, you have nothing really to portray to a potential donor. And related to that, the idea that we're heading somewhere, you need a set of structured ministries, landing places, where people can, when they come in new or when they're looking for a new way to live out their life in Christ, there's a place for them to do something. And it needs to be Christ-like. We talked in Camp Hill about the importance of everything being holy to be set apart. Okay, so that's some aspects of this whole idea that it is not a set of practices, it's not a business process, it's not a sales process, although there are elements of that in doing a good job. I see it. So I'll stop there. Did I engender any questions that would get stale if we don't deal with them now?
There are none in the chat.
All right. Well, submit them and then Stacy break in if
Okay.
you see them. Okay. So I'll just kind of continue on here with. And again, these are things that come to mind. So I put them down on paper. Say thank you often. I think I said that in Camp Hill as the #1 good practice for anything in a parish. If, however, during the period of time, and usually we'll talk in a moment about pledging. I don't know how many of you use the method that's commonly known as pledging, but usually that has a particular time of year. Often that time of year is this time of year. If suddenly, and most of the communication, let's face it, to the parish comes from the priest. Not all of it, but most of it. If suddenly Father starts using the word thank you a lot in October as we lead up to our pledge time of year, people are going to go, "What? I think I'm being set up." So I always find things to thank people about. Be model gratitude with gratitude for all the things that are going on in the parish. Say thank you often. I think it's an obvious thing. Relative to the question of practices, you need a method. At least with the parishes I deal with in the Orthodox Church in America, I see only kind of 3 methods.
Hey, Joe, I'm going to interrupt a second.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do this, but Father Costa, I'm going to have to embarrass you for a second and ask you to put your phone on mute.
Sorry.
No apologies. It's just
Yeah.
I want to make sure Joe is well heard.
Okay. Yeah, there was, it sounded like we were washing dishes again. You need a method. The only 3 methods I see that exist are one called dues, in which is a one size fits all. Everybody pays the same thing. If you still have dues in your parish, run like the wind away from that. I'll repeat it. Go away. Stop it. All right? The other 2 methods are pledging and the non-method. We simply ask when we need, and we encourage people to be generous, and you might do that in various ways. There are many parishes that I'm aware of that use that non-method. They've gotten off of dues, and they don't like the structure and rigor and effort associated with pledging, and so they go with that method. They tend to be relatively small, homey kinds of parishes, but I have seen many that make that work, and there is a certain businessy quality about business type quality about pledging that sometimes bothers people. And as I sort of implied, pledging is a certain amount of work. So there. I mean, you can't, in order for it to work for you, it has to be something more than simply writing a letter and sending it out to people with a form. However it is you might want to send out that form. Now, so, okay, item 3B there, you need a method, and I prefer pledging primarily because, and this kind of gets down the list a little bit ahead of, I'm getting a little ahead of things. Primarily, I think pledging is the better of any of those 3 methods because it forces you to ask. It also forces you to review what the parish is doing with its money, to get back to talking about the fundamental mission of what you're trying to accomplish in the church. And that is done can and should be done in a relatively cohesive manner, which is why then I strongly prefer that method. But again, I've seen the other method work well. Dues worked for many years for a variety of reasons, but I got to think we're beyond that. And I hopefully most of you are, if you're not beyond it, you're trying to figure out ways to get past it. I think I understand all the reasons why we can't do this. Well, we're afraid. What if we don't get as much money? If people aren't told exactly what they have to give as a minimum, etc.
Joe, I'm going to interject one quick second.
Yeah.
In the Pittsburgh metropolis, about 5 years ago, we had as many as 7 parishes that were still on dues out of roughly 50 active parishes. Today, I think we may have 1 or 2. So I'm happy to report that we're almost out of that mindset. And the second thing I wanted to interject is that not just in our metropolis, but across the Greek Archdiocese anyway, the parishes that have made the change from dues to pledging and true stewardship have seen almost on average double the amount of money collected on a pledge system versus dues. And that's
interesting.
Around the GOA a lot.
I would say in the parishes I'm aware of in the OCA that there are still more that are on dues than what you're reporting.
Interesting.
What can I say? Now, and I think the reason it goes up is it requires, well, I'm just preaching to the choir. You're all beyond that, so I'll go past that. Nonetheless, when you consider changes to a stewardship program, even though you may be on a pledge program, it may be not as effective as it could be. Often what I find is that parish council members asking to go slowly, let's be careful here, let's hold back a little bit, are often among those who are the least generous. And that's an experience I've had. So I put down here, don't allow the voices of the least generous people on your parish council or in the congregation to deter your efforts. That can happen. That's an experience I've had. Now, going down the list here, I write stewardship before fundraising. And I don't want to land on this hard because I know that probably most of your parishes have some sort of festival kind of activity going on. My experience, of course, in the OCA, there are not as many festivals, and if there are those festivals, they are not as significant in terms of making money as some of yours are. And on the other hand, I will say that one of the downsides of any kind of fundraising activity, be it bake sales or festivals or whatever, is not only does it wear people out, creating significant effort, it's that it becomes one of the excuses for not being generous. I give in other ways. I work at the festival. I do these other things. So you have to get past that, and it also becomes a large supplement, I believe, in many cases in parishes, of the budget, and that then reduces the level of need in some ways for individual generous giving. So I'll say that. Maybe we'll want to come back around that with questions on that. As I work down here, just a few things on the list. I say letter not enough. There is a tendency, I think, for our pledge programs to spend a lot of time each year inventing a better pledge letter. Oh, this year we'll really do it. We're going to write the pledge letter that ends all pledge letters. Yes, it's probably important to have a letter, but the quality and depth and inspiration of the pledge letter probably doesn't make a lot of difference from year to year. You might strike a chord of resonance with someone with a better letter, but that in and of itself, and I find that stewardship ministries spend way too much time on that. The next point I put down here is ask. As I said, I like pledging because it forces you to ask. However, if you're asking only through a letter, that's not much of an ask. So I put down here that leaders should lead, and I'm bouncing up my outline just a bit. Again, the first thing I'll say is the parish council needs to pledge first. For your letter, or for however it is you communicate to the parish the situation and the needs of the parish, it's more effective if you can say, and everyone on the parish council has already completed their pledge form. Or, and everyone on the parish council has completed their pledge form and agreed to some form of an increase that is congruent with their financial situation. So the asking comes first by doing, and everybody on the parish council or the board or whatever you call it needs to do that first. I will also say that looking as my words are coming out here, I'm not liking the order in which I put these on the paper, but looking down to a couple where it says face to face, the most important way, if we are trying to increase the level of meaning of Christ and his church in their lives, is to do something face to face. Maybe it's with a small group, a subgroup, maybe it's with individuals. Now, of course, if you're an extremely large parish, that's a difficult thing to do. I would say as a minimum, it is good practice to make sure that you and the others with you on your stewardship ministry have a list of people who are new to the parish in the last year. And you divide that up, and one or two of you go to visit those new families or persons, sit down, review with them the parish, review with them what its vision is, where we're going, what things are going on, answer some questions. It may well be that the priest has done this already. It's quite probable. But I have gone and done this in our parish, and people have said, wow, this is so nice. You're the first person from the parish that's been to our house. Okay, well, because they didn't invite anybody and no one barged in, and I invited myself. So it's an incredibly important, and you're able to develop friendships, often across generational lines. And so you need to learn to ask. Now, if you're going to go do this, you generally need some tools. And as I say, letter is not enough. And I see that I left kind of some things off of what I like to use for tools. I think it's useful to provide some information about the giving levels, not individually, of course, of people within the parish. And so sometimes we use some charts that show how many people are tithing, or how many people are giving above, what percentage of the parish are giving above a certain amount. And if you are in fact or how many people last year increased their pledge, you need to have some set of information to help people understand, I think, that they are not alone in standing up and taking action on believing in your parish and having it have a real meaning in their lives. Now, the other critical thing, I'll go kind of double back for parish councils, is the role, somewhere down here toward the bottom of the screen, it says priorities and not budgets. Quite often, when stewardship ministries provide information, no matter how they do it, maybe they send a letter and then they send a budget or a form. Budgets are usually pretty boring. They are not usually forward-looking. They don't usually highlight the question of what could we do if? What are our sets of priorities that we could move toward if, in fact, we all could be engaged to a greater level in Christ's church? So when it says here on the sheet, be aware of pockets of giving, I see G here, beware one size fits all. One of the things that I would suggest is that there are probably 2 or 3 key categories that different people who have been in the parish differing amounts of time and are of different age groups will likely resonate better with. Some people are going to resonate with the operational side of the budget. And that could have the sub areas of buildings, maintaining buildings and facilities. It could have to do with making sure the priest is well cared for and his family. It could have to do with ministries and making sure that those are well funded. There also, though, and so make sure that you are equipped with a story of what we might do if we had additional funds in the area of the operational budget. Where are we tight? Likewise, there is the question of local charitable kind of giving. And you will find that there are some people that are less interested in the operational side of the parish and are more interested in the ministerial and outreach aspects of the parish. And those can be divided in a couple areas, both local ministry, local charitable ministry, and world charitable ministry, giving back to the old country, whatever it might be. And so I always suggest that you have a set of priorities in each of those areas, those key areas, that is clear that if in fact I can find it in my heart to participate to a greater, with a greater proportion of what God has given me, and give a greater, a greater proportion of that back to the parish, that here are the kinds of priorities we can work toward. So those are some of the key things. And let me just double back here. I see a couple that I haven't talked about. Letter I. Start early. I think that and you may in the GOA have done some better work than we've done on this in the OCA, but I think there needs to be a set of church school lessons on generosity, on stewardship, that can be taught at varying levels in church school and adult education. And I think it would not be a bad idea to ask children to make some kind of pledge of time and talent or something from their allowance back to the church to teach them. Now, I'm guessing that there might be some parents that wouldn't be completely happy with that idea. I've never actually run into people that weren't, but I think that retreading people's attitudes toward generosity is not an easy thing. I sent something to Stacy, maybe it was on the thing I sent out, I don't know, something from Dostoevsky, that a man lives the second half of his life doing the things he was taught in the first half. So if people are adults and they have children, they already have a set of stewardship attitudes. It's hard to retread those. If you're looking at your parish having a long-term viability and flourishing over the long haul, building those kinds of attitudes into children is maybe one of the best things you can do. The item right below that, that was letter I, start early youth, is
Joe, I'm going to interrupt you before you
Yes.
move.
Yeah.
Before you move to letter I, and remind everybody on the call. Well, maybe not remind. So about 3 months ago, we had a video conference with a young man named Stephen Christoforou. I know Joe is familiar with him. Just letting everybody know that on the Metropolis of Pittsburgh YouTube page is the video recording of that call. And he talks about stewardship to, you know, kids who are just out of college and early into their professional careers. And then the second thing is that Father Alexander Petrides has done a nice job with his Goya, his youth group, and starting them on stewardship. I don't have anything formal from him. He's just kind of told me about it anecdotally, but those are a couple of sources for anybody on the call you may want to investigate just to learn a little bit more. And interestingly, Father Alex Petrides, when kids committed, you know, a portion of their work, whether it was $5 a month or $1 a week or whatever it was, it actually brought along some parents who had not been pledging stewards as yet. So that was an interesting byproduct. I just wanted to interject.
Yeah, that's important. In fact, I was going to refer to what I am guessing that Christoforou said. I mean, for young adults, not just going beyond children, you know, people, millennials, so to speak, they tend to be very oriented to outreach, helping others. And so if your parish budget has like 0.2% of what you spend money on associated with that, they don't resonate there. And they aren't old enough to know the good old days of the parish and how it used to be, and that we have to keep the lights on. And for somebody as old as me, that's what people like me tend to think about. We got to keep that roof handled. Millennials don't generally, it's always bad to generalize, but that's not generally what turns them on. So you have to, my point that I didn't make well, I don't think, is you have to be able to adjust your pitch, so to speak, the way you present this to various audiences. If you give the same story to every group, it's not going to be that effective. And so when you get back to a letter, maybe you want different letters going to different age groups, all right? So anyway, I've used up a lot of time. Just a couple of things. Do not beg. It's when parishes get in a position where things are grim for one reason or another, that costs exceed income by important amounts and you're dipping down into reserves, it's easy for the stewardship method to be the treasurers to stand up and say, we got to all give some more money here because things aren't going so well, or some version of that. Nobody gives money to the Titanic. They don't jump on sinking ships. So if you talk to people like the ship is sinking, even if it has some leaks, that is not a good way to encourage people to do things, all right? So you have to have a forward look, etc. I'll just go through a couple other quick things. Online form, I assume many of you have your pledge form online. One of the ways in which we look like old fuddy-duddies to millennial types is when we give them a paper form that's sent to them through the mail or even email. My daughter gets so upset. She says, I do not use paper. I don't know where the paper is. So stop bothering me about turning in the paper form. If she can click on a link, make her pledge, she's happy. All right.
Yep.
So that's probably obvious to many of you, but if you're not doing that already, it's important not to annoy people. The word tithing, we tend to run like the plague when that's mentioned. And I could go on and on about tithing. Tithing, I'll simply say, is Orthodox. There's nothing about tithing that is Protestant only. It is an Orthodox concept. There are those who say, well, tithing is not is Old Testamental, and we've replaced that in the New Testament. Well, yes, in the New Testament we're taught to give everything back. All right, fine. Tithing is nice because it gives a target that most of us have to stretch to reach. I'll skip this next one. The point about should the priest know the donations? We get this one a lot, usually from people in parishes that don't want the priest to know the donations. In my opinion, he should. That becomes a difficulty and becomes another difficulty for the priest. And in my opinion, the stewardship ministry needs to know something about the giving level. If I'm going to go talk face-to-face to somebody, I'd like to know, did they make a pledge before, and at least roughly what kind of things are they, where are they in the overall scheme of things within the parish? So we can talk about that further if you want.
Hey, Joe?
Yes?
Yeah. Hey, this is Jimmy Senos from Camp Hill. I like the points that you're touching on. If we could go back to the online just for a second.
Yeah.
I think you really hit on the key points about the culture that's changing within every church, where the younger folks prefer the electronic transactions. So very quickly, we institute an online pledging and contribution program about 2 years ago. And no surprise, it's the younger community that gravitates towards that type of program.
Yes.
Although I would say some of the folks that have maybe remember the paper form find that the online giving is actually easier because it's structured where they could do monthly payments, quarterly payments, pay in full at the beginning, pay in full at the end. It helps organize their finances.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. There are at least within in the OCA I have encountered who find the idea of online giving sometimes people do it through credit cards, whatever. They sort of feel that that's not a good practice, that it can teach people to abuse their finances. Personally, I don't agree. The other thing that you run into with online kind of donations is there is some kind of cost. My experience, well, would it be your experience that the benefits outweigh the costs, and that you may have seen some donations go up?
Yes.
And overall, the 1 or 2 or 3% costs are
yes. I know on a personal level that I've been able to contribute more because I break it up into 12 easy payments versus waiting to the end of the year and just hoping and praying that there's enough money from the year that we can finally make our contribution, which is, to me, not a good strategy. There's too many variables that play throughout the year, but if you break it up into segmented payments, you find yourself giving more. The other thing, Joe, I wanted to touch on was the level of stewardship payments. So at Camp Hill, we broke into this past year 3 levels. Level 1 is what we call stewards, up to a certain dollar amount. Level 2 is distinguished stewards, up to a higher level amount. and then what we call the level 3 or leadership stewards, which is the highest amount. And what we found is more folks, now that we've got structuring, more folks are realizing, number one, is that is needed, and two, it helps them push themselves more, going back to tithing, rationalizing that I'm accomplishing something by pushing for the next level up. I just wanted to share those two things with everyone.
Yeah, to be honest with you, that probably would not be my preferred way of going about doing it. But I can say anything you can do to begin making concrete suggestions to people about moving up the ladder. I mean, obviously, the potential difficulty with that is, I assume there is a fixed dollar amount with each of those levels, and not everyone is in the same economic condition. A similar kind of thing. It's not something you can't advertise it, so to speak, as clearly as is simply to say, I've often asked people, look at what you gave last year, and amazingly, a lot of people don't know because they obviously didn't give a lot of thought to it. What is your total income? What's that as a divide the two one by the other, and that's the percentage you're giving back. Tithing is a model. You may be a long way from that. Is it possible you can move up a ladder by 0.5% or 1% towards some kind of goal? So let me just quickly, because I have talked not unpredictably more than I thought I should, but let me just mention these books here that are down at the bottom. Books to read. Good and Faithful Servant. That is a book, that is an Orthodox book by Anthony Scott. I think it's very good. The final chapter deals with many practical things, and including should stewardship ministries know what people give. I have an article on this web page down here at the bottom that talks about what is it? What's something about it's not confidentiality. See, here, confidentiality is not secrecy. There's an article here on this website. You'll find a fair amount of information from me on stewardship there. The book First and Finest is by a Ukrainian Orthodox priest. Forget his first name. His last name is Hollet. Good fundamentals. The part at the end, in the last chapter, again, deals with practical things, and those can be useful depending on where you are. The book that I have found very valuable is this book called Creating Congregations of Generous People by, I think it's a Michael Dural. I should have looked up and had the website, the link to it here. I found it very good. And I have, by the way, some rather detailed notes from that book. So if anybody wants those, maybe it's like the Cliff's Notes. If you don't want to read the book, you can get the notes from me, and you can find out what you want from that. But that covers a lot of stuff. Stacy, I see that I didn't leave much time for questions, so
that's okay. We started a few minutes late, so maybe we'll run 5 minutes or so over. Is there anybody? I have not received anything in the chat, but is there anybody who would like to raise their hand and ask a question of Joe at this point?
Let me ask the question. I mean, did I hit the mark for some of you, or if I didn't, what might you have liked to hear about? Maybe we can chat about those things. Obviously, I couldn't cover everything, and whatever. If there's something you would have liked to hear about, maybe we can try and together discuss that.
Father Joe, can I put you on the spot?
No.
Excellent. Thank you. Goodbye.
Everyone else asleep, maybe. I don't know.
I just have a tough time. You know, we get stewardship material every year from the Archdiocese, and it looks good, and they're good ideas, platforms, I guess, for us to work from. But I really struggle finding people within the parish who are committed to being a committee to work on that stuff, to help with the letters, to, you know, talk to folks and all that. It really just ends up being me. And so I guess the only thing that's going through my head is how can I inspire people to take up that ministry within the parish?
Let me say something about what you have already said, and then I'll try to answer that. It's not an easy thing to answer. The thing that I always say but didn't is that if the asking is left up to the priest, that is not a good stewardship ministry. Now, you already realize that because you're trying to find people. But for those of you who are lay persons on this call, do not leave the asking to the priest. Okay, obviously, he has the number one problem is, well, yeah, of course he wants more money. He's protecting his salary. It's a reaction that people have. It's reality. So people need you as stewardship. If you are a layperson and you are involved in some way with stewardship, you need to be doing the asking in some way. A next thing that comes a little closer to your answer to your question, I think, Father, is that the parish council needs to be involved. People on the parish council should be helping to do this job of increasing the level of meaning of Christ and his church in the lives of parishioners. My rant about parish councils all the time is that they work on bills, budgets, and buildings. All of those are good, but parish councils need to work on vision and ministry, and they have to be able to describe where we want to go as a parish, what our longing for, what we're longing for, what our hopes are. And if you're not getting someone from other pockets within the parish, so to speak, then I would first push hard for the people on the parish council, and there may be a good set of good reasons why they're the last people you want doing that. I don't know, but you need to have a good working relationship between the stewardship ministry and the parish council. And if there isn't a stewardship ministry, then the stewardship ministry has to somehow grow out of the parish council, and they have to be tasked to do some of this. And you don't have the time to kind of go into, I mean, the number one reason you usually hear back, I think it's I don't know if it's really the real reason. People say, oh, I could never ask for money. I couldn't do that. Let's say, you know, it's just not me. You know, I in my life have had to sell things. I've had, as an independent consultant, at times I had to sell myself, and I had a hard time doing it. But I don't have, I mean, okay, fine, I'm maybe a different personality than a lot of people, but a well-constructed story about a good, vibrant parish, wow. There has to be some people that can get excited about that. And if it's not them standing up and asking, then maybe you want, and I don't know how, always the delivery of messages is always the difficult part, all right? Whether you do it with sermons, whether you do it with a letter, blah. If you have a time after church where maybe it overlaps with church school or something, ask some of your most generous givers. They may not be the biggest givers, but the most generous givers, if they would somehow share a brief kind of testimonial as to why they have done what they've done, how they learn to be more generous. If you can find a couple of people like that, now that they don't want to be held up on a pedestal. They don't want to be, so it has to all be done right, of course. And maybe then they can be the start of a ministry to talk about things. And again, if you think of what's in the blue box here, a great deal of what we accomplished was to define what the church stood for, what we were committed to, and we created high standards in the parish. Maybe the stewardship ministry isn't functioning at the time when you're asking for money. Maybe they're functioning when you're asking for commitments to ministry. Those are some things that come to mind. And okay, that's a tough question for everyone. Maybe you have other thoughts yourself, Father Joe.
No, thank you. I do. It is hard to get members of the parish council, at least who's currently on council, sort of excited about the whole thing. I am trying to figure out who outside that I could perhaps put the touch on, but I did hear that. Yeah, from a lot of people. That's not me. I'm not comfortable with asking for money. Blah, blah,
I
blah.
assume you might have trouble getting people on the parish council as well. That's a common thing I hear. It's hard to get somebody to serve on the parish council. They don't want to do it, blah, blah, blah. But, or any ministry or some church school teachers, etc. But this is a little different. And
but I would
have a magic bullet, obviously.
But thank you for that.
With so many of the parishes of our metropolis being on the smaller side, half of them are 150 families or under, Father Joe, I try to encourage one person from a parish council and one person from outside of parish council to kind of form the core along with the priest, because it's inevitable, that at least they're going to need the consultation of the priest, to sort of make up the stewardship team to begin with. To have two people is kind of not the bare minimum, but it's where you want to start in most cases. And if one is a parish council member and one isn't, that's fine. You need somebody with that access to parish council and, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to keep talking because I don't know if there are other questions out there or not. Anybody who is still muted? Let's see, I see John, I see Maria. I know Father Costa is still on the call, but he's disappeared himself, and that's okay.
Can I?
Please, go ahead, Maria.
Hi, this is Maria from Holy Cross in Strasbourg. Being that I am on the parish council, and I am also in the stewardship committee, and I'm listening to what you guys are saying, and yet people still don't want to hear sometimes. It's tough.
Yes, well, that was point number one, not for sissies.
And just getting the forms, the ministry, just to fill out like where you want, not, and we're not talking about money wise. I'm talking just to get them to pledge, and we have a hard time. And yet they give, but they don't even want to fill out the pledges.
How is that because there is a sense of, how long have you been doing pledging as opposed to maybe some other method that didn't require people to fill that out?
I know for sure we've been doing the pledges for at least 8 years.
Yeah.
And we've even changed. I told them they were complicated. We even made them a little more simpler, like, just, so much more simpler, like, but I just feel like.
Well, you never, first of all, in my experience, you never get 100%. The percentage that's right is a better percentage than last year.
No, we get about, I'd say 20% every year.
Wow. Yeah, wow.
And we're still trying to come up with new ideas. That's, what we're trying to do.
do you, and I know this is a kind of a thing that leads to Father Joe's question of I can't get people to do this, but do you follow up by phone or email or at coffee hour with people who have not submitted their pledges? Do people on the stewardship ministry do that?
I follow up usually in person because I feel phone calls or sometimes emails, people just don't respond to them in our parish.
Yeah.
I feel
Well,
they like that.
I think that's the best, personally. I mean, parish I'm in is very email centric, so there probably is a little different set of responses. But even so, it takes a little bit of fortitude to go up to somebody and say, Frank, we're trying to work through the people that haven't yet committed their pledge, and we divided up the names here on my list. Can I help in some way? Is there a reason you haven't done that? What can I get you a new form? Again, as we said, if the thing is online, can I send you an email with the link to the form? What's up? And have you done? What do you hear from people as the reason why they don't?
Well, I just don't have the time. Some is I just don't have the time, and I mean I kind of get it. The younger generation, we all run around with our children, and I kind of get it, but that's
Maria,
one of the things. The older generation, I don't have an email, so we mail them. But I think we need to push more. I liked what you were saying about the online. I think we need to push more that way and just kind of grab more of the younger generation and maybe make it easier.
Well, somebody that's 70 and I'm in that cohort.
And yet you're savvy.
Yeah, they grew up with it probably with a different system, particularly if it's 8 years that you've been doing it, 10 years. They've probably been around in your parish for a while, and so it's a change. And making the change is always hard. It's hard, it's just not that easy.
I mean, they still call it dues. You would laugh how many checks come in under dues.
Yeah, well, yeah. And people aren't used to making this choice, this decision for Christ. That is something different than coming to church 15 minutes late 3 times a month. And we can go on and on about this. I mean, we're not solve this here on this call, but that's part of what. If you send me an email, I'll send you the notes from this book that I mentioned at the end. I think reading through that, I shared it with some people in the stewardship committee in our parish, and I think they've got a lot of, practical ideas out of it.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll send you an email and you send me.
I'll send it to you. And again,
all right, thank you.
It's not, it's not an article. It's just a bunch of stuff I wrote down. It's my notes.
That's okay. Yeah. Notes are always good. Extra things are always good. Extra ideas.
Yeah,
Maria, other questions or something?
Yeah, Maria, if I could, I can share with you what's worked for us in Camp Hill in the last couple of years. One is communication, frequent communication. Our weekly bulletins has a section of stewardship. Our monthly newsletter has a 6-page section where the up-to-date, using very visual bar charts and graphs, really has helped educate people. So in other words, it's not November where we start to look for collections. We start in January and we look at it as a monthly basis. The third thing, and again, I can share this with everyone, we have a poster in the narthex where they can take a quick glimpse of where we stand each Sunday, where they light the candles. And then when they walk to get their coffee in the hallway to the gym, there is a 4-year or 5-year projection of where we've been, where we are, where we're going. And then every quarter we do a stand-up presentation at the end of Divine Liturgy with how we're doing throughout the year, and redefining what is stewardship, and not to confuse it with our festival income. So suddenly with this discipline and frequency, it's a radical change with our community. And I'll be happy to share everything with everyone.
Yeah, Jimmy, that all sounds like very good information. And if you want to email to me, and I'm happy to disseminate it to everybody on the call, or whatever you'd like.
Yes.
However I can help share the information, I'm happy to do so.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. I'll do that.
And I mentioned in the chat, there is a study out about Orthodox generosity, put out by a guy named Alexei Krindach, and I have both the study and the executive summary of it. So if anybody is interested in that, please let me know, and I'm happy to email that as well. We're closing in.
Let me jump in. I gotta say something on that, Stacy. One of the reasons why people don't give as much as they can is there is often a sense that, well, people don't have it, or, you know, times are tough, or whatever. There is a similar kind of study that covers all religious groups in the U.S. and which are the most affluent. And Orthodox Christians against everyone, any group, is number 2 in affluence. So do not accept people are giving what they can. People are, they don't have it. In general, we are more gifted than 95% of the people in this country. It probably should be a higher number. Likewise, I have some, back to the other point, I have some things that parishes have used, again, to get beyond the letter. You need to be able to explain how money is being used well in the parish, and you probably are doing some of that, but you have to do it at a high level. And then you need to be able, and again, I think this gets back to engaging the parish council. I've said it a couple times. Here are our next 3 priorities, the next set of things we can do with additional money. And that needs to be worked through. And if the parish council can't work at that level, wow, I think we just have to challenge them. And I can understand that there are many that don't.
That's the vision that people that people will give to when they see, you're not just worried about today, that you're looking much more forward and to the future. That's when, people give to a longer term vision. We're at 5:45. And again, I always try to be respectful of everybody's time. I don't want to cut the conversation off, but I understand some folks have had to drop off the call already. If there's anything else for Joe, please, raise your hand, let me know. I will make sure that everybody has all the information we talked about today from studies and surveys. And Joe, if you would send me this document you're referencing. One last bit of housekeeping. Helen Rankin, who is on by phone, just reminded me. So the 4th Thursday of November is, as we all know, Thanksgiving. Let's not have a call that day. We're going to push the call back to December 5th. So that would be the first Thursday of December, and that'll be our last call for the year. We'll stay away from, the holiday weeks altogether. So December 5th is the next stewardship team call, and our last one for the calendar year. I just wanted to get that out to everybody.
Yeah, I put my phone number on the bottom of the page here. Your first line of defense obviously is Stacy for support and help. I'm happy to field phone calls simply from you, simply because I like hearing what the real situations are in places. So if there's something I said you want to talk more about, I'm happy to do it. Don't feel like you're busting in on my time.
And I sent everybody your email address
Okay,
in the chat as well.
All right. Okay.
All right. I'm going to say thank you. Oh no. Well, we'll jump off that bridge when we get to it. I'm going to say thank you to Joe for his time again. It was well received by the clergy lady group, and I think he's got great information and thought-provoking information to present. So Joe, thank you.
Thank you.